You know, you can learn a lot from children. I know I certainly have. For example, did you know that that little slot on the CD player that we never use nowadays in our car is a perfect place to play the game Moneybox, in which you insert copious amounts of coins into that slot and create a little money box. Although I must warn you that whilst it's a fun game to play, apparently, no matter how much money is humanly possible to cram into that machine, it will still not be enough in that money box to pay for the replacement that you will have to purchase. But you know, there's other lessons I've learnt from my children, and you know, one of the greatest ones are those when they teach us to live better, live in a more learned way. Now, I remember when my wife and I were just, our children were probably 10, 9 and 7, and we took them down to Sydney to see the sights. And I remember walking through the bustling street and I had a child in each hand, well, holding each hand. And as we were walking around, we came around a particular corner, and as we looked down, we actually saw that there was a beggar lying on the street. He was on his knees, he had his head on the ground, and above his head, he was holding a cup. And obviously he was begging for donations. And you know, I'm ashamed to say it, but my gut reaction, as soon as I saw this, was to veer to the other side of the sidewalk. And I tugged on the hands of the children that I had. But my youngest child, little Caleb, 7 years old, I felt a tug in the opposite direction. And then as I looked down in my dismay, I felt his hand slip from mine. And in this bustling crowd, I quickly looked for him and I saw Caleb not moving away, but moving towards this man hunched over on the street. I caught Caleb just before he arrived as he was kneeling down to reach out to this man. And I remember as I grabbed him, he turned up to me and he looked at me and he said, "Dad, we have to help him." And you know, I looked down and I saw this empty cup. And I thought to myself, if I put my hand in my pocket and put money in there, I know that I'm more than likely funding the next packet of cigarettes or the next bottle of alcohol. And yet I felt also this sense at that moment in time there was a profound lesson to be learned here. And so I actually reached into my pocket and I handed my child, Caleb, some cash, and then he moved and put it into the box, into the cup. And you know, well, there was a valuable lesson to learn that day, and it was learnt by me. Caleb was the teacher. You see, what we've been learning about in this program is all about how your limbo is wired, how your home of happy operates, how it functions. We've learned about how your limbo is wired to the language areas of your leader, and so how you speak influences the way that you feel. We've learned that your limbo is wired to these millions of little nerves distributed throughout your body, and so how you move affects how you feel. Motion creates emotion, and so you need to move dynamically. We learn how your limbo is wired to your senses, particularly sight and bright sights and sounds and smells and tastes. And so in order to be upbeat, we actually need to immerse ourselves in an uplifting environment, physical environment, but so too social environment, because we've discovered that our limbos speak to each other. And so we communicate, we pick up on how each other feels. And so we need to immerse in an uplifting social environment also. Then we learnt about how your limbo is wired to the front portion of your leader. And this is the part of our brain that gives your attention to things. And so what you focus on affects how you feel. So we need to learn to look to the positive. And we explored some experiments and exercises in doing that. Then we learned about your guts, which was the biggest part of you, and how these electrical impulses and these chemicals that are produced in there influence, once again, your limbo. And so food affects your mood. And then finally, we learn about when you get a bit sleepy and when you get a bit tired, that all of a sudden these chemicals start to produce and you start to feel very, very differently, as we know. And so you need to rest well, sleep, but also take time out also. And so we've been learning about these strategies, but what I want to say to you is that whilst we've been learning about how your limbo is wired and how the chemicals influence, the anatomy lesson finishes here. Because you know what, I can't tell you why or explain or illustrate using leads or wires or the action of hormones, how this final strategy for living more happy, for living more up works. But I can just tell you from my own personal experience and from the experience of literally hundreds of people that I've interviewed, and not only that, even science now tells us that this strategy just works. You see, many years ago, when my wife was a teacher at the local high school, and she decided that what she wanted to do was to take a group of kids, about 20 kids, on a trip, on a community service trip, out to country outback New South Wales in Australia. And so the idea was to take these 20 along to do these various different projects. They were going to paint fences, they were going to run kids clubs for the kids, they were going to visit the retirement villages, they were going to liaise with the other community interest groups, just going to go out there to do good, essentially, to serve in various different ways. And she said to me, hey, you know what? We don't have a bus driver. We need a bus driver. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, I've got a bus licence. But you know what? At the time, I was ridiculously busy. I was finishing a PhD, I was building a house, I was just like one hectic person, right? My life was out of control. And then I'm starting to get nervous. I'm thinking, oh, what's going on here? You know, how on earth could I take a week out of this productive time? You know, I've got so much going on, but they couldn't find a bus driver, and ultimately, I was it. And so I kissed away this week of productivity to go out to this community town and actually get involved in these community service projects. What I can tell you is that project, that program called Stormco, Service to Others Really Matters, Stormco, Storm Company, just changed my life. You know, changed my perspective on what it is and what it takes to truly go up emotionally. You see, what I've discovered, and you probably already know, is that service activities, by contributing, not just consuming, it actually lifts us in a profound way. You know what? Science is actually telling us the exact same thing. We actually now know, for this example, this study, we actually found that people who volunteer once per week, volunteer their time once per week, actually get the same level of happiness boost from that as those people who were earning an income of less than $20,000 per year, which is essentially below the poverty line in the United States, to earning an income of over $75,000 annually, which is not on the poverty line, let me tell you. You know, the same happiness boost comes from just volunteering your time once per week as compared to that sort of increase in your income. In fact, we now know that volunteers not only live happier, they live healthier, and they even live longer, believe it or not. There is just so much evidence coming through from various different studies. There's another one that actually indicates that those lawyers that are involved in service-type activities, who have a service orientation as compared to a money orientation, whilst they earn vastly less income, they report vastly higher levels of happiness and life satisfaction. Now, this is coming through time and time again. Studies that have been done where people are given money to spend. All right, like, pick me! You know, but what they actually find is that some people, they say, go and spend this money. Go for it, enjoy, buy yourself something nice. But then to others, they say, here's some money, but we want you to go and spend it on someone else. And do you know what you see? Only those people who spend money on someone else actually boost their level of happiness in the long term. So you can purchase money, you can buy happiness, but you just probably need to spend it on someone else. You know, Professor Martin Seligman, the father of the positive psychology movement, he has said this. He said, you know, we know that doing a kindness produces the single most reliable increase in well-being, that is happiness, of any exercise we have ever tested. So why? You know what, that question, why is it? What is it? Why is it that doing good is so good? What is it about it? Why does it lift us the way it does? In fact, why do we do it at all? You know, scientists have actually are puzzled about this because from an evolutionary perspective, why would it be good for me to actually help someone else when there's absolutely no chance of retribution? You know, if they can never reciprocate, never give back. You know, why would I donate to someone on the other side of the world who's starving? You know, why would I engage in these service-type activities to give in no expectation of getting? It just doesn't make sense. But you know, in this, there was a fascinating article published in Scientific American Mind, and it was called The Samaritan Paradox because of this. And this is what the researchers ended up by concluding. Our species is apparently the only one with a genetic makeup that promotes selflessness and true altruistic behaviour. You know what? It's good to be good. There is something about serving, about giving, that actually allows us to receive in a very, very profound way. And so this leads us to our last strategy for living more happy. We've learned about speaking positively, moving dynamically, immersing in an uplifting physical and social environment, about looking to the positive, about eating nutritiously, about resting in sleep and taking time out to de-stress. But this last one comes to the point, and perhaps is the most deepest point, and that is if you want to live more happy, you need to serve.